Hello there, this is Teresa Litchfield. Welcome to the second video for my Color Matters series. This is a series I decided to create where every once in a while I'm using a certain color or when a color matters in your projects. Today is all about the Pantone Color of the Year Peri, and I'm excited to showcase the new Dynamic Blossoms Craft Your Life kit from Altenew with this. I didn't have any inks that matched this color because it's really in between a purple and a blue. So I'm going to show the inks I use to create the color and also some different ways that I blend them so you don't contaminate your ink pads. But first, let me show you this new gorgeous kit that I'll be working with. Here's the stamp set with the beautiful floral spray, and it's got lots of layers for the flowers and leaves in there. Altenew always has a great inspiration guide, and it's got the layering steps inside of it, and I always love the inspiration they have in case you're not really sure what you want to make. The first layer, the flowers and leaves, are going to be on the stencil set, and here's that set. And there are 4 different stencils in the set, and they have a lot of possibilities. But the first stencil is the one you're going to color with the flower arrangement. And then the second stencil is for the leaves. The third stencil lines up with the embossing folder with most of it. There's part of it that doesn't show up on that stencil. And then the fourth stencil has a die that goes with it. And I'll show you a little bit later how I end up using that. And here's the 5-piece die set, the one that comes out the bouquet, the 2 words, and then 2 flourishes, and that one goes with the stencil. And then here's the 3D embossing folder, and again that stencil just lines up with the bottom part of the embossing folder. For the first card, I'm going to use the floral bouquet stamp. I'm going to place that in my MISTI and stamp it with Altenew Obsidian Pigment Ink. And then I'll set that aside to let it dry while I start the process of blending my inks. I played around with some of the inks to create a swatch I could refer to, and what I came up with was by blending the Enchanted Garden and the Lapis Lazuli inks, it gave me just the right mix of color for the Peri. I laminated a sheet of cardstock to put the gel plate on so that I could turn it easily and clean it off. And I'm going to use the gel plate to blend the inks to color the first layer through the stencil with some of the mini blending brushes. I can place my stencil onto the stamped image now, and I'll use the a Tim Holtz sprayer to blend my inks. And I'm going to start out by using the Wisteria ink and put some of that on my gel plate, and then I'll switch to the iceberg and put some of that on there, and then I'll take my brayer and braid those together. This is a really fast and easy way to mix the inks, and I can adjust it and test it out to make sure it's the color I want. And it's also another great use of the gel plate. I can test that out against my swatch to make sure I'm on track, and then I'll put that in my MISTI to start stamping the layers. The 3 flowers on the top are all hooked together on one stamp, and then the other 2 are single stamps, but I'm going to stamp them all together at the same time. I start out by stamping this layer with the hydrangea ink, and after I stamped it and checked it with the swatch, I realized I didn't need to stamp it with the Eastern Sky because the previous layer already had enough blue in it and I didn't need to add more. I lined up the next layer and stamped it with the ultraviolet, and then stamped it again with ultramarine. And that balanced out the color and gave it a lot of depth. Stencil 2 is the first layer of the leaves, and I inked those up with the Firefly ink. I really like the mini ink blending brushes. They are just the right size, not too big, and I feel like you have a lot of control with them. I keep moving this stencil until I have all the leaves inked, and sometimes I do add a piece of tape to a spot so I don't accidentally color the wrong thing. This is so pretty, and you could really just stop here if you wanted to, but I'm going to add the leaf detail with the stamps. I do stamp the different leaf stamps one at a time with the green felt ink because part of them overlap and you can't stamp them all at the same time. I think the detail on top is just amazing. And then I ran that through my die cut machine to cut it out. And I just wanted to show a little comparison between my swatch and then the actual color of the inks. And you can see it really does make a difference to blend them. I also cut out 2 more solid die cuts to stack underneath for dimension. I'm using the 3D embossing folder for the background, and I wanted to show a little trick that I just saw Yanis Makula use, and she I always wet my paper down, but she really just drenched it, and wipe it around on both sides and put it in the embossing folder and run it through the machine. And I just was amazed at the impression that I got with this. So take that out and look at this. The impression is just so deeply embossed and there is no cracking. I did use 80-pound paper to do this, but I just thought that was amazing. I always get a little shrinkage with my embossing folders, and I usually use a 6x6 piece of cardstock, and this time I used an A2 size, so I'm going to take another panel of cardstock and ink blend on the bottom, and this will go underneath the embossing folder. So I started out with hydrangea, and now I'll switch to the eastern sky. I glue that panel underneath the embossed panel, and I just think it really pulls the color from the flowers, and it makes a really nice border too. Off screen I cut the word U 3 times from glossy black cardstock and stacked them for stability and dimension. To finish off the card, I added a black strip to the bottom border, and then I stamped the sub-sentiment with Obsidian Pigment Ink, and then added the word U on the side of one of the flowers, letting it kind of suspend and hang off on the left side. On my second card, I'm going to use the die with the matching stencil that I showed at the beginning, but I'm not going to use the stencil in the traditional way of ink blending through it, so stay tuned for that. I die cut that piece out in my Gemini Junior with 110-pound cardstock, and then before I remove the die, I'm going to add some tape to the back so I can keep it all together in that panel. And then I can remove that die and most all of it stays in there. I know I might be a little bit crazy, but I'm going to pop out the pieces and color them with the gel plate. And I'm starting with a mix of hydrangea and eastern sky, and I'll use the brayer to braid those together. And then I'm just going to pop out individual pieces that I want certain colors. So I'm going to start out with that color first and do a few of those. And then after I'm done, I put a piece of paper over that and put the brayer on top of it. And what I'm going to have with this is I'm also going to have some colored cardstock to use. So I pop that off, and I just think those are so cute. And I'll pop those back into that. And that's why I put the tape on the back to keep those together. And now I'll use the ultraviolet and the ultramarine. And I'll select a few more pieces just to get a variety of color on the image. So I do the same thing, and I'm just laying down the color, and I use the brayer again to mix them together. And this time I'm going to spray it with a little bit of water, and I just found I get a little bit more intense color when I do that. And I'm going to put that same piece of paper on there and use the brayer. And I've just got all kinds of colored paper now, and pop those back in. And I decided I wanted to use a little bit darker, so I'm using the darkest colors in the family. This is Andromeda and Azurite. And I just keep using the same process to color all the flowers. I'll end up using the colored cardstock for some embellishment on the card, and I also cut out the image with it so I can have those tiny centers for the flowers, and I don't have to color them on the gel plate. That was so much easier. Then I'm going to switch to using Greenfield ink, and I'll cover that on the gel plate, and I'm going to use that to color all of the leaves. And I decided I really liked the look of the water. It kind of gives that watercolor drop look on it. It's a little bit tedious, but I like piecing things together, and it really isn't hard to do. So here's where I started cutting out the image with the cardstock I created, and I just filled in all the pieces that were left. I could have done this from the very beginning, but this really helped me to visualize where I wanted certain colors to go. I'm going to use the Dotted Tile Debasing cover die that came out a couple months ago for the background on this. I was going to just use the panel that it's on, but I got some ink on it, and so I thought it'd be fun to kind of pop it out. And here's why I'm going to use that stencil. So I'm going to use the stencil to pop that through onto that debossing die. Just to keep the image together so I can line it up right. So I pop those in the pieces, and sometimes I have to pull up the stencil a little bit just to get it to pop through it. I just saw these two products and thought it would be a fun way to use them. And here's how I ended up finishing the card. It honestly didn't take a lot of time to make once I figured out what I wanted to do. So I used some strips from the cardstock I made and cut a border from the Scallops die and added it to the top and the bottom. And then the hello is from the set, and I cut that out of the cardstock. And I sprayed it with the iridescent shimmer spray. On the flowers, I added some glossy accents to make them stand out a bit, and I just added a single pearl to the bottom there. All of the supplies I used are listed in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up, and while you're at it, become a subscriber and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I have a new video. I've linked to a couple of other videos here at the end, and the one is the first video I created for my Color Matters series, if you haven't seen that. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really hope you have a great day doing something you love.